welcome to Watch Symposium. I'm Austin. Have you heard about the Stan Barrett collection? A trio of Rolex watches that sold recently, I think it was December 9th, through Sotheby's in London. All right, it was a bit of a disaster. You want to hang out because I've got a little bit of backstory, a little bit of interesting gossip, so you're going to want to hear that. But who is Stan Barrett? Well, he was a stuntman, and he was best friends with Paul Newman. Now imagine having a Paul Newman watch, a Paul Newman Daytona. I'm not talking a Paul Newman Daytona, I'm talking Paul Newman's Daytona. Well, he had that. It was a 6262 and it was given to him by Paul Newman. It was Paul Newman's watch and it was given to Stan Barrett. Now think about having that watch and think about the fact that the highest priced selling watch in history was a Newman Daytona. It sold for over $16 million. It was given to Paul Newman by his wife. Really cool inscription on the back. It says, "Drive carefully, me." And it sold for over $16 million. So if you had a Newman-owned Daytona, you'd think, man, this is worth millions. I mean, what? You'd think if I sold this watch, it might not get 16 million. It probably wouldn't, but be conservative about it. Would it get half, a third? We're talking millions. But he didn't just have one. He had 2.5. What do I mean by 2.5? How can you have a half a watch? We'll get there. But Stan had an all-steel 1675 that came from Newman as well. It was a gift. Now you can see both watches here. This is such a cool picture because Stan Barrett looks so awesome. He's got a shirt off. He's got a nice tan going on. He's wearing both watches, both Newman watches. And then he's standing in front of the red Budweiser rocket car. And that's the car with which Stan Barrett first in history broke the sound barrier on land. All right. So this is an amazing picture. And that's where the third piece comes in, because it wasn't ever a Newman's watch and it wasn't given to Stan by Newman, but it's sort of associated with Newman. And I'm sure Newman saw it, probably touched it, probably said, "That's a really cool watch, Stan." But it was given to Stan by the president of Budweiser, and it's got an inscription on the back commemorating this amazing achievement. So think about it. You've got 2.5 Newman pieces, incredible provenance. That's millions, right? Well, the selling price of these watches was shocking to me. And let's start out with the non-Newman piece, all right? And that is a beautiful, incredibly beautiful 1675 yellow gold. It's got a Jubilee bracelet, nipple dial, so awesome. And look at this price. It sold for $69,300 USD. And I thought, wow, whoever bought that got an incredible deal, because a regular 1675 all gold piece would be $40,000 easy. That beautiful nipple dial. But you got to add to it the provenance and the fact that it came from Sotheby's and it's going to have the documentation. So I thought, wow, what a good deal for whoever bought that. All right, well, what about the other GMT? That sold for $81,900 USD. Now, this is a true Newman piece, has papers. It's a little rough around the edges, but, again, I can see it being worth about that. I'm kind of surprised it didn't break 100,000 USD, but yeah, not a bad price, but again, a little bit disappointing. Now we get to the Newman Daytona, and again, what would you think you'd get for that watch? I mean, a couple million, right? Oh, devastating. Okay, it sold for 378,000 USD. You put all these watches together, didn't even break $1 million. Ouch. All right, so this is where the backstory comes in, the gossip, and we often hear about these sale prices, but we don't know how the sellers react after the fact. Well, I know, all right? A little bit of backstory on the 6262 Daytona. Stan actually gifted that to his son, Stanton, who is a race car driver and who is godson to Paul Newman. Now, Stanton, Stan's son, did not want to sell it, but his dad actually took it back and said, now's the time to sell. So that's gonna cause some problems, I'm sure. And I think Stanton is who I really feel sorry for. Now, the piece wasn't perfect, and it's really rough around the edges. In fact, a lot of parts have been replaced, including the dial, because Stanton was in a wreck and he was wearing that watch. So that accounts somewhat for the low price. But they didn't even break $1 million. What was Stan's reaction to it? Well, I quote, he was very upset. He had big plans for that watch, and he thought he was going to get millions. And all we can do is just sort of look back and say, what happened? Well, if you'd gone through a different auction house, Phillips, you probably would have gotten more. That's something I've heard. But Sotheby's sweet talked him, kissed his ass, from what I understand. And so he went with Sotheby's. He didn't read the fine print. He didn't realize that Sotheby's is going to get 25% of that. Ouch. And when you take into account capital gains, he's going to be lucky to walk away with 250,000 USD in his pocket. So he had big plans for this money, and there you go. I mean, it's devastating. I imagine it hurts, and when you think you're going to get millions and you get $250,000 only, then I can imagine it being pretty tough. As they say, don't count your chickens before they hatch. Now, one thing that was going against Stan was the timing. If this had been a year or two ago, I think he would have gotten a lot more. But look, crypto is down, stocks are down. People aren't spending the kind of money on watches that they were. And so I think when he decided to sell the watch, things were going up. But when the actual auction came around, prices were down, and that hurt him a lot. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, and largely it's a matter of perspective. I mean, Stan Barrett didn't pay a cent for any of these 3 watches, and he wore them for decades, and now he's got $250,000 to show for it. And so look, if I gave you 3 watches for free, and I said in the future you'll be able to sell them, you will sell them, and you're going to bank $250,000, you'd be pretty happy. But it was the expectation of millions, and it's not an unreasonable expectation. I mean, if I had 2.5 Newman watches, I'd think millions of dollars in my pocket, but it just didn't work out that way. But hopefully Stan's all right with this. He's got $250,000 in his pocket for pieces he never paid for. I really feel sorry for Stanton. I think he's the real victim here because it was his watch. It was given to him by his father, and it belonged to his godfather, Newman himself, and to have that taken away, I think it's got to hurt. And then to see what it fetched. If it did fetch millions, then I can imagine he'd be pretty happy about it. But maybe not so now. But hey, there's always somebody worse off than you. I mean, there's a dude in Brisbane that would kill for that $250,000 to spend on watches. So, Stan, count your lucky stars that you ain't that fucker. Let me know what you think. Take care. Thanks for watching. See you next time.